Have you ever noticed how a truly outlandish fact just, well, lodges itself in your brain,
Yeah.
refusing to be dislodged?
Oh, absolutely.
Or perhaps a bizarre, almost surreal image from a movie or maybe a book that's just burned into your memory, like impossible to forget.
Yeah.
It's much more than just a fleeting impression, isn't it?
Yeah.
There's a genuinely fascinating psychological phenomenon at play here. It profoundly influences how our brains decide what information to cling to
Yeah.
and what to simply let drift away.
Precisely. And today we're embarking on a deep dive into that very concept. A compelling phenomenon known as the Bizareness Effect.
Okay.
It holds immense potential as a powerful tool for memory enhancement, but as we sort of peel back the layers, you'll discover it operates under some rather intriguing rules and, yeah, delivers more than a few surprising twists.
Right, so our mission on this deep dive is to truly unravel this effect. We'll start with its core definition and understand the fundamental mechanism behind its power. Then we'll journey through the fascinating research that has meticulously uncovered its underlying processes, exploring whether it works uniformly for everyone, what specific conditions make it effective, or, conversely, ineffective.
Yeah, the boundaries.
Exactly. And what the very latest scientific insights reveal about how and why it shapes our memory. To think of this as your essential shortcut to grasping one of memory's most peculiar yet undeniably potent tricks.
And there are definitely some unexpected insights ready to challenge your assumptions along the way.
Looking forward to it. #time1. What is the Bizareness Effect? A surprising foundation of memory. So let's lay the groundwork then. When we talk about the Bizareness Effect, what exactly are we defining? What makes something bizarre enough to stick?
Well, at its essence, the Bizareness Effect describes this remarkable cognitive phenomenon. People show a significantly higher likelihood of remembering information when it's presented in a strange, unusual, or unexpected manner, especially compared to information that's entirely mundane or predictable. The clearer thinking team, for instance, they put it quite simply. They state that people are more likely to remember information that is strange or unusual.
Right.
And it builds on that intuitive idea that, the more unusual or unexpected something is, the more likely it is to be remembered. It's really about that jolt of unexpectedness.
That makes incredible intuitive sense. It almost feels like our brains are, I don't know, hardwired to pay attention to anything that deviates from the norm.
Yeah, like an evolutionary thing, maybe?
Could be. Can you offer some relatable, everyday examples that maybe bring this concept to life for us?
Absolutely. Think about how much easier it often is to recall a person's name if it's highly unusual or just completely unexpected.
Oh, definitely.
You meet 20 people named John, maybe, and they might blur together, but you meet one xylophone, and, well, that name is likely to stick.
Right. You won't forget xylophone.
Exactly. Or, perhaps even more commonly, think about those stories you remember or hear you remember them, not just for the plot, but for the one or two truly strange, unexpected, or peculiar things that happened in them.
Yeah, you latch onto that weird detail.
Right. We often find ourselves saying, oh, that story about the time, and then you insert the bizarre detail. It's those moments that kind of act as vivid anchors in our minds. And actually, memory training experts, those incredible mnemonists from way back, they've advised people for centuries to deliberately associate information they want to remember with bizarre, vivid imagery. For instance, if you want to remember someone named Ellie, you might imagine her face, but on the body of an elephant.
Okay. That's pretty bizarre.
Right. Maybe tap dancing on a tightrope for good measure. This kind of imaginative, bizarre association has long been celebrated as one of the most effective mnemonic techniques available.
So it seems these ancient memory masters were really onto something, like way ahead of their time.
It seems.
But that raises a critical question. If this strategy has been recommended for centuries, has modern science consistently validated it? Was it always so clear-cut in the lab?
That's where the story gets really interesting, actually. While using bizarre imagery as a memory aid has indeed been championed for hundreds of years, it's quite surprising to find that, until relatively recently, there was this puzzling lack of consistent empirical research. Yeah, research to fully and reliably support its effectiveness. For example, prominent researchers like McDaniel, Einstein, and others back in 1995, they specifically pointed out this noticeable absence of consistent empirical support in the scientific literature.
So it's like folklore almost, but not solid science yet.
Kind of, yeah. It was a well-known intuitive trick, but one that academic research really struggled to consistently capture in controlled settings.
That's truly counterintuitive, isn't it? If the effects seem so obvious, so intuitively correct that bizarre things are more memorable, what explains this inconsistency in the early scientific findings? Why was it so hard to pin down?
Well, the primary challenge, it seems, lies in the very precise conditions required for the bizarreness effect to reliably show up.
Okay,
While our intuition screams that bizarre info should be more salient and thus better remembered, early studies often failed to consistently yield strong evidence.
right.
And a key reason for this historical lack of consistent support is that the bizarreness effect seems to only reliably emerge if specific experimental constraints are meticulously met.
Constraints. Like rules.
Exactly. It means it's not simply a matter of making something weird and expecting it to stick. It's about constructing that weirdness in a very particular way, within a very specific context, for the brain to really leverage its mnemonic power.
So it's not just a simple on-off switch. Yeah.
Not at all. Think of it more like a carefully calibrated instrument that needs just the right settings to work properly. So let's dig into those crucial settings or constraints then. The ones that dictate whether the bizarreness effect actually appears. One of the most fundamental requirements involves how bizarre and common information are presented to the learner. It seems absolutely critical that the bizarreness effect appears to only occur when bizarre and common information are intermixed.
Intermixed, so it's about context and contrast then. You need the mundane, the expected, to sort of highlight and elevate the bizarre.
Precisely.
Like without that backdrop of normalcy, the bizarre just doesn't stand out as much.
Precisely. Imagine trying to spot a truly unique fluorescent green fish in a tank filled entirely with other equally unique fluorescent green fish.
Right, it wouldn't look special.
It just wouldn't stand out, would it? Now imagine that same fish swimming among a school of ordinary gray fish. Boom, it immediately captures your attention.
Okay, got it.
The principle is similar for memory. When bizarre and common information are blocked, meaning they're presented in separate groups, like here's all the bizarre sentences, then here's all the common ones.
Right.
There's virtually no memory advantage for the bizarre information.
Wow.
Yeah. This clearly underscores that the distinctiveness, the memorable quality of the bizarre item stems directly from its stark contrast within a varied, mixed set. It's the unexpected element in that sea of ordinary that really grabs and holds the brain's attention.
Okay, so mixing is key. What else? What's the next rule?
Okay, moving to our second critical constraint. The complexity of the information itself plays a significant role. Research consistently indicates that complex stimuli are less amenable to bizarreness effects than simpler stimuli.
Huh. Now that sounds counterintuitive. You'd think more detail, even bizarre detail, would make something more memorable, not less. Can you walk us through an example of how that complexity actually plays out?
It's a great point, and it does seem backward at first glance. But consider early studies. Kroll, Shapler, and Anjan back in '86, for instance, they largely failed to find a significant bizarreness effect when they used relatively complex sentences.
What counts as complex?
Well, maybe something like the flamboyant senator with a penchant for bizarre hats was seen juggling flaming chainsaws while reciting poetry. Lots going on there.
Right, yeah.
Now, contrast that with McDaniel and Einstein in '89. They were able to consistently get significant effects by simplifying the material, maybe just down to the senator juggled flaming chainsaws.
Similar, yeah.
Right. This suggests that if the information is already inherently elaborate or rich in detail, the added bizarreness might not actually provide much of an additional mnemonic boost.
So the complexity itself is already helping memory.
Exactly. Robinson Ragler and McDaniel's 1994 research really dug into this. They found that when sentences were already complex, maybe with extra adjectives or descriptive clauses, these intrinsic details provided powerful retrieval cues all on their own. Essentially, the complexity itself offered a memory benefit, effectively diminishing or even kind of overshadowing the unique advantage of the bizarreness. Their experiment 4, for instance, showed complex sentences were recalled significantly more often than simple ones, regardless of whether they were bizarre or common.
So complexity won out over bizarreness in that case.
Pretty much, yeah.
Yeah.
This led them to conclude that complexity on its own can indeed confer a strong mnemonic benefit. And as a result, the bizarreness effect seems to be constrained to an impoverished encoding context.
Impoverished encoding context. What does that mean in plain terms?
It basically means the bizarreness effect truly shines and is most effective when it's applied to simpler, less elaborated sentences or concepts, places where there aren't many other strong cues already competing for your brain's attention.
So it's like a distinctiveness budget for our brains.
Yeah.
A simple image like a dog jumping rope works better than, say, the old shaggy brown dog with one floppy ear expertly jumping over a brightly colored rope made of yarn.
That's a perfect analogy.
Because the second one already has so much detail that the jumping rope part, even if bizarre, gets kind of diluted.
You've hit it precisely. The simpler the informational setup, the more brightly that unique, bizarre element can stand out. If you're trying to create a mnemonic, the Bizareness Effect really maximizes its power when it's one of the primary, maybe even the primary unique features of the information.
Okay, that makes sense. Simplicity helps the bizarre shine. What's the third factor?
Okay, the third critical factor influencing the Bizareness Effect, the specific encoding strategy that people use when they're learning.
Encoding strategy, like how they try to remember it.
Exactly. Research has consistently shown that imagery-based encoding strategies tend to consistently yield evidence of the Bizareness Effect. Trying to form a mental picture seems key. In stark contrast, learning strategies based purely on, say, semantic meaning, or just repeating it over and over rehearsal, generally do not produce the same robust effect.
So it sounds like actively visualizing that bizarre image is genuinely the secret sauce. Is it the mental picture itself that makes it stick?
For a long time, that was definitely the prevailing view. It was heavily supported by foundational work from folks like Cornoldi and colleagues, McDaniel and Einstein back in the 80s. The idea was, yeah, the vivid, unique mental image itself served as a powerful memory trace.
Makes sense.
It did. However, more recent research has added a fascinating twist to this. Studies by Worthen, Weir, and Richmond, Anderson, and Beyer in the 90s, they started suggesting that while imagery encoding-like, the process of trying to form an image is highly effective.
Okay.
The actual use, or say the vividness of that mental imagery, isn't strictly necessary to get the Bizareness effect.
Wait, so you don't actually need a clear picture?
It seems not necessarily crystal clear, no. This implies the benefit might not be solely in the visual act itself, but perhaps in the deeper, more elaborative processing that the attempt to create a bizarre image provokes.
Ah, so it's the effort, the trying to make sense of it.
That could be a big part of it, yeah. It's the effort to integrate this unusual thing that might be doing the heavy lifting, rather than just the final visual experience.
Interesting. So imagery helps, but maybe just trying to imagine is enough.
That seems to be closer to the current understanding. Now, to really grasp why these conditions, mixing, simplicity, imagery, and coding, are so crucial, we need to look at the distinctiveness account of the effect.
Okay, distinctiveness.
Yeah. McDaniel and Gerasi, in their influential 2006 work, proposed a really compelling framework involving two types of distinctiveness. This is where it gets really insightful.
That's two types.
First, there's primary distinctiveness. Think of this as how unique something is relative to other things in the same immediate setting, like our red ball amidst a group of blue balls.
Right there, right now.
Exactly. That red ball immediately pops out. Its distinctiveness is mostly handled by processing during retrieval.
Yeah.
You quickly notice its uniqueness because it stands out in that specific context.
Got it. Primary is immediate contrast. What's the second type?
Second, we have secondary distinctiveness. This is about how unique an item is relative to all your past experiences, your entire long-term memory store.
Ah, like the dog jumping rope example.
Precisely. In your lifetime, how many dogs have you actually seen jumping rope?
Right.
Probably close to zero.
Right.
It's profoundly unusual based on your life experience. The Bizareness effect is argued to be a powerful result of this secondary distinctiveness. Why? Because as the theory goes, there is very little overlap between bizarre stimuli and the stimuli stored in long-term memory. Your brain doesn't have a ready-made dog-jumping rope file.
So it has to create a brand new, unique one.
Exactly. A unique, isolated mental file for it.
That distinction is really clear. Primary versus secondary. And you mentioned something counterintuitive earlier about working memory. That secondary distinctiveness, the bizarre stuff, actually requires less working memory. How does that work?
Yeah, it's a critical point that really challenges our initial assumptions, right? We often think more effort or more unusual equals more cognitive load. But for secondary distinctiveness, the effort isn't so much in the immediate processing to separate it from its current surroundings like it is with primary distinctiveness. Instead, the brain's efficiency kicks in because that bizarre item lacks pre-existing matches or close neighbors in your vast long-term memory.
So it's easy to find because there's nothing else like it.
Pretty much. When you encounter something truly unique, the dog jumping rope, your brain doesn't need to work hard comparing it against tons of similar dog doing things memories. It's not differentiating it. Instead, it gets tagged almost immediately as novel, isolated.
Ah, a unique tag.
Right. And that unique tag makes it very efficient to retrieve later because it has very little competition or confusion with anything else you've stored. It just stands alone in your mental landscape.
That makes sense. Less interference.
Exactly. And this idea sets the stage perfectly for exploring how our cognitive architecture, especially as we age, handles these distinctive and, well, peculiar pieces of information.
Okay, so that point about the surprising efficiency of secondary distinctiveness
Right.
brings us to a really important question for, well, for many of us. Does the Bizareness effect work for everyone? Or are there age-related differences? Common wisdom often suggests memory declines with age, especially maybe memory involving vivid imagery.
Yeah. Is the Bizareness effect truly universal?
Right.
It's an absolutely critical area of inquiry, especially given the natural age-related changes we know occur in working memory. Specifically, our visual working memory, that part of our system responsible for holding and manipulating images, that appears to be particularly vulnerable to the effects of aging. It's pretty well established that younger adults consistently outperform older adults on tasks that heavily rely on visual image processing.
Okay.
So if forming those rich, bizarre images is indeed more resource demanding than forming common images, as some researchers suggested back in the early 90s.
Right, which sounds plausible.
Yeah, then the initial logical prediction would be that older adults, who already might face some difficulties with demanding imagery tasks, would be at a significant disadvantage with the Bizareness effect.
So the hypothesis, based on what we knew about age and visual memory, would naturally lead us to predict that older adults wouldn't show the effect, or at least not as strongly, especially if it really relies on making those vivid mental pictures.
That was precisely the hypothesis that this really interesting 2012 study by Black, McCown, and Lookadu aimed to rigorously investigate. Let's break down their first experiment.
Okay.
They recruited 24 young adults, average age about 19 and a half, and a comparable group of 24 older adults, average age 73.
Okay, good comparison groups.
Right. Both groups were presented with 12 sentences. Half described common, everyday things like the maid wiped ammonia off the table. The other half were bizarre, like the maid licked ammonia off the table.
Okay, definitely bizarre.
Yeah. Each person got 10 seconds per sentence to carefully form an interactive image in their mind, connecting the bits of the sentence. Then they rated how vivid the image felt. But, crucially, this was an incidental recall test.
Meaning they didn't know they'd be tested.
Exactly. They were just told it was a study about imagery. They weren't informed a memory test was coming, so their learning wasn't driven by this explicit goal to remember, just the natural encoding process.
Okay, sneaky.
Yeah.
What did they uncover? Was that prediction older adults would struggle confirmed?
Surprisingly, no. And this is where the findings really start to get interesting. The initial prediction was not confirmed.
Really?
Yeah. While younger adults, as expected, did recall more items overall, just generally better memory performance, the critical statistical analysis showed no significant age differences in sensitivity to the Bizareness effect.
Wow, so both groups remembered the bizarre stuff better than the common stuff.
Exactly. Both younger and older adults demonstrated clear evidence of the Bizareness effect and to a statistically similar degree.
But I see here in the notes it mentions the magnitude of the effect sizes were different. Moderate for younger, maybe small to moderate for older. So younger adults still had a bigger absolute effect, didn't they?
That's an excellent observation, spot on, and it highlights a really critical nuance. You're right. In terms of the raw number difference between bizarre and common recall, younger adults did show a slightly larger effect.
Okay.
However, the researchers took a crucial step beyond just those absolute numbers. They meticulously examined the ratio of bizarre items remembered relative to common items remembered.
The proportional benefit.
Precisely. And when they looked at this proportion benefit, the age groups were, and I quote, basically the same. The ratio of bizarre to common items recalled was 1.32 for younger adults, so 32% better recall for bizarre. For older adults, that ratio was 1.38, 38% better.
Wait, slightly higher for older adults proportionally.
In this specific measure, yes. So, proportionally, older adults benefited from bizarreness to the same extent as younger adults, maybe even slightly more by this ratio metric. This really resonates with some other findings, like Nicholas and Worthen's 2009 study, which also saw older adults benefiting, maybe with smaller absolute sizes, but still showing the effect. It's about that consistent relative advantage.
That truly is powerful. Older adults tapping into this just as effectively, proportionally. Did the researchers push this further? Did they test it differently?
They absolutely did, with Experiment 2, designed to probe even deeper. In this follow-up, participants got intentional learning instructions.
So this time they knew a test was coming.
Exactly. They knew a recall test was coming, encouraged to remember as much as possible. And unlike the first experiment, the presentation was self-paced. They could take as long as they needed on each sentence.
Okay, more control.
Right. Plus, the researchers included specific, standardized working memory measures to directly assess cognitive capacity. The big question was, would knowing they'd be tested, or having measured differences in working memory, change the outcome across the age groups?
So, more pressure, direct working memory measures. What happened this time? Did the pattern hold?
Even under these more demanding intentional conditions, the results were remarkably consistent. There was, again, no evidence of significant age differences in susceptibility to the Bizareness effect based on the main analysis.
Still no difference.
Still no significant difference overall. In fact, in a striking little twist, when they looked specifically at recalling the nouns from the sentences, older adults actually produced larger Bizareness effect sizes in this instance than the younger adults.
Oh, again.
Yeah, and a particularly impactful finding here was the clear demonstration that even participants over 70 years old were robustly able to produce significant Bizareness effects. It really challenges a lot of assumptions about cognitive decline.
This is truly fascinating, especially that reversal. But what about working memory? That was the original suspect, right?
Yeah.
Was there a strong link found in Experiment 2?
This is maybe one of the study's most significant and frankly surprising takeaways. Against those initial predictions, they found no significant correlations between measures of working memory and the Bizareness effect.
None at all.
Well, let me clarify. Working memory capacity was correlated with overall episodic memory performance, basically. People with higher working memory generally remembered more stuff overall, which makes sense.
Okay.
But its specific link to the Bizareness effect itself, the boost you get from bizarre items, was found to be relatively weak.
So having a great working memory didn't make the Bizareness part work better.
Exactly. It profoundly suggests that the working memory resources required to actually produce the Bizareness effect did not, in fact, exceed the capabilities of the older adults in their study. The benefit of Bizareness isn't apparently tied to having a supercharged working memory.
So putting all this together from Black, McCown, and Lookadoo, what's the big picture message about age, memory, and this Bizareness power?
Well, the overarching implication is pretty profound. Older adults can take advantage of secondary distinctiveness in much the same way as younger adults. The Bizareness effect appears remarkably robust across different age groups, even when the task involves seemingly resource-demanding things like forming imagery from sentences. The quality or the sheer vividness of the image you form, it seems, isn't as critical as its fundamental distinctiveness, its lack of overlap with other images in long-term memory.
That uniqueness again.
Exactly. And this is vital because distinctiveness doesn't just aid recall. It can also powerfully signal unique events, potentially reducing false recognition too. It emphasizes that novelty, the truly unusual, holds this special, almost age-defying place in our memory systems.
Okay, we touched on this earlier, but let's circle back to complexity. You said complex stimuli can actually reduce the Bizareness effect. That still feels a bit weird to me. Could we dig into that a bit more? Why doesn't more bizarre detail always equal more memorable?
Yeah, it's a crucial qualification and definitely counterintuitive. That Robinson, Reigler, and McDaniel study from '94 really offers the key insights here. They propose that the reason complex sentences don't reliably show the effect isn't just about imagery difficulty. It's that the inherent complexity itself already provides significant mnemonic benefits.
Oh, so?
Well, imagine that sentence again. The cunning, red-headed detective, known for his eccentric habit of knitting scarves during interrogations, meticulously examined the dusty antique pocket watch.
Okay, lots of detail.
Right. Cunning, red-headed, eccentric habit, knitting scarves, meticulously examined, dusty antique. Each of these details acts as its own little retrieval cue, its own hook into memory.
Ah, so the sentence is already memorable because of all those hooks.
Precisely. In their experiment 4, they directly compared recall for these complex sentences versus simpler ones, and they found a significant advantage for the complex sentences, whether they were bizarre or common.
Interesting.
This strongly suggests that when the encoding context is already relatively rich, when the info itself is detailed, elaborate, provides lots of internal connections, then more specific and varied retrieval cues are already baked in.
Okay.
And these built-in cues can effectively diminish the mnemonic advantage of bizarreness. The brain already has plenty to grab onto, so the unique bizarre element has less room to make an exclusive, powerful impact.
So it's like the Bizareness effect works best when it's one of the only standout features. Like our lone red ball in a sea of plain blue ones.
That's an excellent way to think about it.
If you make the blue balls multicolored and textured, the red one isn't quite as special anymore.
Exactly. Their conclusion was that the mnemonic effectiveness of bizarre imagery is further constrained to an impoverished encoding context, meaning it works best with those simpler, less elaborated sentences. If there are other strong cues from complexity already there, the bizarre advantage lessens. It's about leveraging distinctiveness where it's most needed.
Okay, that makes more sense now. It's about relative distinctiveness.
Yeah.
Now, beyond complexity, what other surprising factors might be involved in making bizarre information stick? Is it just the strangeness, or is there maybe something else like an emotional component?
This brings us to a really fascinating and, I think, often overlooked area: the unexpected role of humor.
Humor, really?
Yeah, for a long time, mental imagery and maybe the element of surprise were the main candidates proposed as mediators for the effect, but the actual evidence supporting them has been kind of mixed. Then, Schmidt and Williams, back in 2001, they provided some compelling initial evidence suggesting humor might be involved. They found that pictures rated as genuinely humorous led to significantly better recall than pictures that were just bizarre but not necessarily funny.
Interesting. Funny beat weird.
Kind of, yeah. This sparked a new line of thinking. So Worthen and Deschamps in 2008 set out to rigorously investigate this further, specifically using verbal stimuli, sentences, and crucially, using a really long delay recall design, 14 weeks.
14 weeks, wow, that's testing long-term memory for sure. What did their study reveal about humor's influence? Did funny weird win again?
Their findings were indeed compelling and pretty definitive. First, they confirmed the established fact. Bizarre elaboration does significantly enhance recall, even after that lengthy 14-week delay. So the effect is durable.
Okay.
However, their critical sort of groundbreaking insight was that the facilitative effects of bizarreness on both free recall and cued recall were dependent on the humorousness invoked by the bizarre elaboration.
Dependent on humorous.
Yes. In essence, they concluded that bizarre elaboration facilitates recall only when it induces a humor response.
So it's really not just weird that sticks, it's funny weird that gets properly lodged in our memory. That feels incredibly insightful, especially if you're trying to make information engaging.
That's precisely it. The results strongly suggest humorousness acts as a significant, maybe even necessary mediator for the Bizareness effect with verbal material. They also noted something interesting. Only a small percentage of generated images were rated high in bizarreness and low humorousness.
Meaning if it was really bizarre, it was usually also funny.
That's what it implies. They suggest that highly bizarre images are typically considered to be funny, and that bizarre images that are not funny are unlikely to be generated. It points towards this deep, almost natural connection between true bizarreness and humor and how we create and process these mental aids. Our brains seem to automatically find the truly bizarre amusing.
It's a profound link. Does this humor response have any other side effects on memory? Like, does it help you remember details or just the main idea?
Good question. It does, and it adds another layer of nuance. The humor response, while powerfully enhancing memory, can actually lead to both helpful and potentially disruptive effects.
Okay.
While it clearly enhances memory for the gist, or the main idea of the event you remember, the funny bizarre thing happened, their findings suggested it does not aid and may disrupt memory for details.
So you remember the joke, but maybe not the setup perfectly.
Kind of like that, yeah. This fits quite well with other Bizareness effect research, which sometimes indicates that bizarreness, while making the core event memorable, can occasionally interfere with the precise binding of specific elements within that event. It's like the overall humorous shock grabs your attention, but maybe at the expense of perfectly encoding every little detail that made it bizarre.
An interesting trade-off.
Mm-hmm.
Broad memorability versus precise detail.
Exactly. Gist versus detail. Now let's circle back to one of the most curious and persistent rules we talked about. The Bizareness effect is almost exclusively observed in a mixed list design.
Right, where the common and bizarre items are studied and recalled together.
Exactly. And this pattern isn't unique to bizarreness. It pops up in other distinctiveness effects in memory, too, like the orthographic distinctiveness effect, where a weirdly spelled word like phlegm stands out in a list of regular words.
So that immediate context of the whole list seems crucial for the bizarre items to really pop. But why? Is it something special happening when we put the information in during encoding? Or is it more about how our brain pulls it out during retrieval? This feels like a really fundamental memory question.
It truly is the core debate that fueled a lot of research for years, encoding theories versus retrieval theories.
Okay.
Encoding theories basically propose that an unusual or bizarre item attracts additional processing at encoding just because it stands out. All that extra processing, they argue, creates a stronger memory trace, leading to better recall.
More attention in, stronger memory out.
Kind of. Some researchers even thought the increased effort needed to image bizarre sentences was the direct cause of the memory boost. But then you have the retrieval theories.
And they say,
They argue the effect happens primarily during the act of retrieval itself. In this view, the distinctiveness of the bizarre item simply provides a much better, clearer retrieval cue in that moment when you're searching through your memory, especially when you're comparing it against the more common items also floating around in that memory set.
so it's about comparison when you're trying to remember.
Exactly. Comparison at the point of recall, not necessarily deeper initial processing.
That's the classic chicken and egg problem, isn't it? Which comes first? How did researchers figure out a way to definitively test this, to untangle encoding from retrieval?
This led to a really clever and, I think, pivotal study by Gerasi, McDaniel, Miller, and Hughes in 2013. Their whole goal was to get unequivocal evidence for the selective role of retrieval.
Okay, how'd they do it?
Their method was really innovative. It was designed to separate the encoding experiences as much as possible. Here's the setup. Participants studied common sentences in one specific room with one set of instructions and a cover story. Then they physically moved to a completely different room.
Different room entirely.
Yep. And there, they studied the bizarre sentences under totally different instructions and a separate cover story. This meticulous separation ensured the two types of items, common and bizarre, were learned in distinctly different episodic contexts, minimized any chance of them interacting during encoding.
Okay, so the learning was deliberately kept separate, physically and mentally. What happened when it was time to remember? Did the recall conditions make the difference?
Exactly. At the recall stage, they split the participants into two crucial groups. One group was asked to recall all the sentences together, drawing from both study rooms, both episodes. This essentially created a mixed retrieval condition, even though encoding was separate.
Yeah.
The other group was explicitly told to recall the common sentences and bizarre sentences separately. Tell us the sentences from room A, then tell us the sentences from room B. This created a blocked retrieval condition.
Mirroring the blocked encoding where the effect usually vanishes. Clever.
Right. The brilliance was seeing if the mixed list effect could be triggered just by mixing at retrieval, even if encoding was separate.
And the results.
Yeah.
Did this finally nail down encoding versus retrieval? This feels like where it gets really interesting for how memory works.
The results were, frankly, strikingly clear, and they provided a powerful punch in favor of retrieval. The Bizareness effect was only obtained when participants recalled the common and bizarre items together.
Only in the mixed retrieval group.
Only then. There was no Bizareness advantage whatsoever when they were asked to recall the common and bizarre items separately.
Wow.
And to really nail it down, they used Bayesian analysis. It showed a compelling 91% chance of no effect in the separate recall condition versus basically a 100% chance of a robust effect in the together recall condition. It wasn't just a small difference, it was definitive.
This is truly a landmark finding. It strongly suggests that how you retrieve the information, the context and comparison happening at the moment of recall, is far more critical, more fundamental to the Bizareness effect than how you initially encoded it. It really shifts the focus, doesn't it?
Precisely. This 2013 study really stands as the first to unequivocally demonstrate the selective, pivotal role of retrieval. It powerfully implies that differential encoding processes are not necessary for explaining the Bizareness effect. The effect truly depends on retrieving the common and bizarre sentences together.
Hmm.
And this fits beautifully with newer memory models where distinctiveness isn't just about the item itself, but critically about the retrieval set, the group of memories you're considering at that moment. A bizarre item becomes truly distinctive and super well remembered only when considered in the context of a retrieval set that includes both common and bizarre items.
It needs the comparison group right there during the search.
Exactly. It's that vivid, immediate contrast created at the moment of recall that truly unlocks the memory advantage. It's the brain seeing the odd one out, but only when it has a standard to compare it against in that specific search.
Okay, let's just take a breath and unpack this. This whole deep dive into the Bizareness Effect has been full of genuine surprises, really challenging some basic assumptions about memory. What are the truly big takeaways for us, for how we think about learning, remembering, maybe even cognitive health?
Yeah, what does it all mean? Well, the primary takeaway, I think, is that the Bizareness effect is undeniably a powerful memory aid, but it's far from a simple one-size-fits-all magic bullet. Its effectiveness is exquisitely sensitive, highly context-dependent.
Right.
We've learned it can work remarkably well across the lifespan, proving just as proportionally beneficial for older adults as for younger ones. And surprisingly, typical working memory limits don't seem to hobble its power.
Which is great news.
Absolutely. We also now know it functions optimally with simple, not overly complex information. And, perhaps most delightfully, that a touch of humor seems to be a significant, almost necessary ingredient for its full potential, at least with sentences.
Maybe the most profound finding, the one that really shifts perspective, is that the very latest research points to the act of retrieving bizarre and common information together as the truly crucial mechanism. It's not just how you put it in, but how you pull it out.
Exactly. This shifts our focus from solely emphasizing the initial learning or encoding phase to recognizing the paramount importance of the retrieval environment itself. It fundamentally means that just making something weird isn't enough to guarantee it'll be remembered.
Right.
Instead, it needs to be the right kind of strange presented within the right context during recall. The magic happens when the brain gets that chance to contrast the unusual with the usual during the memory search itself. And this understanding, well, it carries significant practical implications across tons of real-life scenarios. Think about students, for example. If you're trying to remember a long list of vocabulary words or scientific terms, historical dates, whatever it is, deliberately making some of them bizarre, maybe linking them to absurd images, and crucially, intermixing these bizarre associations with your more standard notes, that could be a highly effective study strategy.
So don't just make everything bizarre, mix it up.
Exactly. Contrast is key. This applies equally to remembering names at a networking event. Instead of just repeating John Smith, maybe imagine John Smith juggling squid, but only do that for a few names, not all of them.
Right, right. Or key facts for an important meeting, even your grocery list. Instead of just milk, bread, eggs, imagine, I don't know, milk raining from a tiny cloud indoors, bread wearing sunglasses, and eggs doing ballet.
Perfect. But just for a couple of items on the list, the unexpectedness, especially when contrasted with the mundane items, makes it far more likely to stick when you're standing in the aisle trying to remember.
And think about anyone who tells stories, gives presentations, creates content marketers, educators, speakers. This research suggests that intentionally weaving in strange or unexpected elements, maybe even funny ones, can significantly make stories more memorable and engaging. It's not just about the content, it's about making that content unforgettable.
Precisely. In public speaking, for instance, a single bizarre or humorous anecdote, carefully placed within a serious presentation, can act as this powerful mnemonic hook for the audience. It ensures they remember your core message long after they've forgotten the bullet points.
Good tip.
And furthermore, that consistent finding that older adults benefit equally proportionally highlights valuable, accessible strategies for lifelong learning and keeping cognitively engaged. Plus, the distinctiveness provided by bizarre info can even serve as a kind of mental shortcut for recognition, helping to reduce false recognition.
How so?
Well, if something feels truly unique and bizarre in your memory, you're less likely to mistakenly think you encountered something similar before. It helps confirm, yes, I definitely remember that specific weird thing, improving accuracy.
That makes sense. Now, as with any really deep dive, we often come out with even more intriguing questions. What persistent puzzles, what compelling unanswered questions still remain for researchers digging into this fascinating effect?
Oh, there are definitely still puzzles. One persistent one, and it's quite counterintuitive given what we usually think about attention, is this. While bizarre items consistently require more attentional resources to understand and to image than common items.
Right, they take more effort initially.
Exactly. But that additional allocation of attention doesn't reliably correlate with the recall advantage itself.
Wait, the extra effort doesn't cause the better memory.
It doesn't seem to be the direct cause of the bizarreness effect. It seems that extra cognitive effort might be more of a necessary requirement for the basic understanding of the bizarre information, just figuring out what a maid-licking ammonia even means, rather than directly boosting its memorability because it was effortful. The distinctiveness seems to be a separate mechanism.
That truly is counterintuitive.
Hmm.
So, more initial effort doesn't directly equal better memory via the bizarreness effect in this context. The effort is just to comprehend it.
That seems to be the case. The bizarreness effect isn't simply an effort-driven thing. Another interesting nuance that needs more exploration is that while the effect powerfully boosts memory for, say, decontextualized parts of sentences, like remembering the target word ammonia or just knowing you saw that sentence, it does not consistently enhance memory for whole sentences.
So you remember the weird bit, but not the whole context perfectly.
Sometimes, yeah. It raises important questions about how bizarre information gets integrated or maybe doesn't fully integrate into broader, more complex semantic structures or narratives. Does the bizarreness make the forest memorable, but maybe obscures some of the individual trees within it? And future research will definitely keep exploring the degree of bizarreness on a continuum, from just slightly unusual maybe to truly impossible events. How do these different levels impact memory, cognitive load, the humor response? We're still mapping out the optimal strange hashtag outro.
So what does this all mean for you listening right now? Our deep dive today really reveals that memory is far more nuanced, much more dynamic, and frankly, just more fascinating than simple repetition or rote learning. It's this complex interplay of how information is presented, how our brains initially grapple with it, and critically, the specific context, the specific mental stage upon which we retrieve it.
Absolutely. The bizarreness effect stands as this powerful testament to the profound impact of distinctiveness and contrast on our ability to remember. It highlights that the human brain isn't just passively recording things, it thrives on the unexpected, on the novel. But that unexpected element truly flourishes, truly solidifies into a lasting memory, only when it's allowed to stand out against that backdrop of the ordinary, particularly at the very moment we try to recall it. That retrieval context is key.
So, as you go about your day today, maybe think about this. What stands out to you now about how creating a truly memorable moment, whether it's just in your own mind, maybe in a captivating conversation you're having, or perhaps in a presentation you're delivering, isn't just about being strange for strangeness' sake.
Right.
It's about meticulously creating the right kind of strange at the right moment of recall. It's a powerful thought, I think, for anyone looking to make information not just heard, but truly deeply stick.